Since today is Easter, it felt fitting to do a review of the film The King of Kings, which came out last weekend. This is an animated film based on the Charles Dickens book, The Life of Our Lord, which is a book that he wrote for his children to tell them the stories of Christ from the Bible. This was a film that I really appreciated as a Christian. It was made in a way that was very simple and easy to understand, especially for children. I think this film had children specifically in mind while they were making this. And so a lot of the dialogue and the way it was presented was very simple, but it also did it in a way where things were said and I went, I never thought about it that way before. And so that was kind of cool. I came away from the movie with some new insights into different parts of the Bible and the story of Easter. And so I really appreciated that about the movie. This movie definitely follows the 3-act film structure. We begin the movie with Charles Dickens. He's trying to do a live reading of the Christmas Carol, and his son Walter is trying to play King Arthur, disrupts the whole thing. Charles Dickens gets mad at his son and yells. And so we have a call to action for Charles Dickens. In that moment, his wife finds this story, The Life of Our Lord, and invites him to tell it to his son Walter to hopefully repair their relationship and for him to apologize and forgive, and for Walter to also apologize and learn some forgiveness. And so going in Act 1, Walter agrees to hear the story and Charles tells the story, and we go into when Jesus Christ was born and many of the events that we read about in the Bible leading up to the parts of the Easter story with the Last Supper and Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane and dying on the cross. And then moving from Act 2 into Act 3, something that I thought was kind of cool about this is because this movie is kind of telling two stories, we have the story of Charles Dickens trying to reconcile with his son, and then we also have the telling of the story of Christ. And so with going from Act 2 to Act 3, in terms of the story of Christ, that's, Christ dying on the cross and then Christ being resurrected. And in the story of Charles Dickens trying to reconcile with his son Walter, there's a moment of realization where the story has brought them together and they realize that they can both enjoy their stories together and they don't need to separate themselves from each other. There was this whole thing about there's this sign on Charles Dickens' office where it says, I can't remember exactly what it says, but basically like novelist at work, like do not disturb, stay out, especially the cat. There's a cat in the movie and I have some thoughts about the cat, but I'll get to that later. So there was that kind of came together, and like Charles Dickens ends up taking that sign down and everything in Act 3. And so I really liked that there was a little bit of mirroring of the progression of the stories we learn in the Bible, but then how those stories help teach Charles and Walter how to be father and son, and they can apologize and forgive each other and be family again. And so I really liked that duality in terms of the structure of the movie and what story they were trying to tell. A couple things that I didn't like about this film. I didn't particularly like the cat at the beginning. I felt like there were too many interruptions while Charles Dickens was trying to tell the story, and then the cat like jumps on his lap and he gets distracted. And there was a little bit too much of that. But as the film went on, the cat kind of grew on me. The cat started to represent some of how it was like a visual representation of how Charles and Walter were able to become closer again. And there were also some really nice foreshadowing moments with the cat that I really enjoyed. So yeah, the cat did grow on me, eventually did serve a purpose, but the beginning, I wasn't a huge fan of the cat. Also, some of the character designs were really bad, in my opinion, especially for the 12 apostles. Many of them looked really weird, and I don't know why. Some of the, like, a lot of the character designs looked fairly normal in this animation style they were doing, but then other characters were just kind of way out there. And so I felt like that was a little distracting, to be like, oh, why does that character look that way? Like, that's really odd. And then I also felt that Act 3 was way too short. Now, because this film was based on the life of our Lord, I don't know how Charles Dickens has written, I haven't read the book, but Act 3 is Christ being resurrected, and then it goes back to the family, and Walter's like, oh, I want to share this story, and then, like, the movie ends. I just felt like it was so short, and there could have been a little bit more time spent on maybe how the characters felt about Christ being resurrected and how that related to their lives, the same way how many of the other stories and things that happened in Act 2 seems to relate. It's just something I wish hadn't been super brushed over. And in terms of structure, like, the third act shouldn't be super short anyway. It generally should be about a quarter of the movie. But yeah, I just felt like Act 3 was too short. Some of the things that I did really like about this movie, again, like I said at the beginning, it was clear that this was made for kids, and so the language was very easy and simple to understand. It made it easy to learn about the story of Jesus and learn about the story of Easter and everything. So I really appreciated that. And then there was a recurring, I don't know if you'd call it a theme, but there was like a recurring thing that happened where, so Walter was pretending to be King Arthur, and he's obsessed with King Arthur, and that's all he cares about. And then when Charles Dickens is trying to say, like, hey, I want to tell you this story, will you listen? And Walter's like, no, I only want to listen if it's about kings. And Charles Dickens says, well, my story is what inspired your story. And I really liked that, and that came up at the end as well. Multiple reasons why I like that. There are so many stories that are based off of other stories that are so inspirational. For example, the way they were portraying it in this movie with the story of Christ inspiring the story of King Arthur and like the 12 Knights of the Round Table and stuff like that. But something I learned in screenwriting is that every story has already been told or has already happened. And so many of the assignments that we had while we were trying to prepare our screenplays was to find a news article that had a similar theme to the theme that we had in our screenplay, or we had to find a myth or a fairy tale that had the same theme and tone or story as the story we were trying to tell. And so it was kind of cool to see that it is possible to make lots of unique stories, but realizing that pretty much everything has been told and you can draw inspiration from everywhere. And so I really enjoyed that common theme that happened throughout this film. So story-wise for this movie, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a super cute story. It was a great way to introduce kids to Easter. It was a great way to have a little reminder why we celebrate Easter. And the story was just super wholesome. For 3-act structure, I gave it a 9 out of 10 as well. Could have gotten a 10 out of 10 if Act 3 wasn't so short. For craft, I gave it an 8 out of 10, and I think I knocked it down to an 8. I think it was mostly just the character designs, where some of them were just so weird and odd and a little distracting for the movie. And then for enjoyment, I gave this film a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed sitting through this movie, and it was nice to just have a nice, wholesome movie. I feel like we haven't had one of those in a long time, so that was really nice. So overall, this movie got an 8.75 out of 10 for me. So if you haven't seen this movie, I'd highly recommend you go see it. Go take your kids to go see it. It's a great way to celebrate the Easter season and to learn about Jesus Christ and all the things he did. And I hope you all have a happy Easter.